Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into a topic that most people don't really talk about? We're going to be exploring how BPD and sexuality kind of intertwine. We've got some really insightful research here, and honestly, it's been eye-opening, even for me. We're talking about how borderline personality disorder can seriously impact what's going on, in the bedroom and beyond.
It's a really important conversation to have.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to be super mindful and respectful as we unpack all of this because it's a sensitive topic. If you've got BPD or if someone you love does, you get it, right? It's not just about mood swings. It's a whole different level of complexity, especially in relationships. So are you ready to really understand how intimacy and BPD play out?
Let's do it.
Awesome. The first thing that jumped out at me was how much emotional stuff impacts intimacy for someone with BPD. And I'm not just talking about feeling in the mood, is way deeper. What's the connection there from your perspective?
You've got to get BPD at its core. Imagine constantly feeling like your self-worth depends entirely on someone else loving you. That fear of being abandoned, constantly worrying about being rejected, it's incredibly intense. It makes it so hard to relax and be vulnerable, especially, sexually.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like trying to have a romantic dinner while you're on a roller coaster, all that emotional stuff just going on in the background.
Exactly. And because BPD often comes with uncertainty about your identity, someone with BPD might seem totally confident one day and then completely withdrawn the next. It's like they crave intimacy one minute and push their partner away the next.
That push and pull it can be so confusing for both people. The research actually gave this example. They called them Sarah and Mark. One night, Sarah feels super connected to Mark, wants to be physically intimate. Then bam, the anxiety hits, old fears come back, and she shuts down. Mark's left feeling totally rejected and confused, understandably.
It's such a classic example. Things can change so quickly, and it highlights something crucial for everyone listening. Instead of jumping to, what's wrong with you? Try shifting your perspective. Ask yourself, what just happened here and how can we work through it together?
It's about recognizing those emotional waves as part of the landscape, not a personal attack. But how do you even begin to talk about it when it feels like you're walking on eggshells?
And that takes us to another big hurdle with BPD, communication breakdowns, especially about intimacy, about what each person wants and needs.
And the research is really direct about this. It says how tough it can be for someone with BPD to say what they need clearly, especially in the heat of the moment. Remember that example where Sarah tries to tell Mark what she wants sexually, but she gets so anxious that the whole conversation blows up?
Sadly, that's incredibly common. It's not that they don't want to connect, they do. But when those intense emotions take over, it's like their words get hijacked by fear and insecurity.
They want to express themselves, but then
It all just comes out wrong.
so their thoughts are racing a mile a minute and
Yeah, they just can't get the words out right.
they just can't make sense.
Exactly. That's why this research really emphasizes patience and listening, really actively listening, especially for the partner who doesn't have BPD. It's about making that space for open communication, even if it's a little messy sometimes.
Oh, for sure. Easier said than done, though, right? The research did mention some helpful stuff, like using safe words to sort of pause a conversation if it starts to get too heated.
Oh yeah, safe words, that's brilliant. It's like having a release valve for all that pressure. When someone with BPD is already feeling vulnerable, feeling attacked or misunderstood, just shuts them down completely. It makes it impossible to have a productive conversation.
So you're really trying to create this environment where both people feel safe enough to be, vulnerable. But what happens when being physically intimate feels kind of, risky? It might cause more problems than it solves. The research talks about this, but it also offers some really cool alternatives to build intimacy, ones that might feel better, safer for both partners.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Intimacy isn't all about sex, right? This research encourages us to think outside the box a little, to find those non-sexual ways of connecting that can actually build a stronger foundation for a deeper connection overall.
Like what kind of things are we talking about? I need examples.
Okay, so think about cuddling, taking a walk together, even just having a deep conversation. These things might seem small or insignificant, but they're all about creating little moments of connection that build trust and make people feel emotionally safe.
It's like those everyday moments, showing up for each other, being there through thick and thin, and you don't have all that pressure of sexual expectations. The research mentioned a couple, Laura and David, who were really struggling. But they found that taking a cooking class together really helped their relationship. How did that help?
Well, it took the focus off of, performance anxiety in the bedroom. Instead of stressing about fulfilling each other's needs sexually, they were just present with each other. They were laughing, trying something new, and creating positive memories without all that pressure. That kind of shift could be huge for couples.
It's like they discovered a new way to be intimate, something that just felt more genuine and safer for them. And speaking of discoveries, the research really emphasizes therapy. Therapy can be so helpful for navigating all of this.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that they point out that seeking help is a good thing. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough to admit you need help and that you want to do better. For the person with BPD, individual therapy is so valuable for exploring those deep-rooted fears of abandonment, learning to manage those really intense emotions, and developing healthier communication skills.
And couples therapy can be really helpful too for bridging that communication gap. Learning to talk about sensitive stuff without it turning into a huge fight, that can make a world of difference.
Exactly. The research even talked about therapists teaching couples to use I statements, instead of blaming each other, like saying, I feel hurt when this happens, instead of, you always do this.
Right.
That helps couples focus on understanding each other and having empathy, not on blaming.
It's like learning to fight fair, but for your relationship, which, let's be real, it can be tough. But when it works, it makes such a big difference.
It does. And don't underestimate how important community is. The research talked about support groups too, and for good reason.
For sure. Just knowing you're not alone in this can be so powerful, right? Plus, you can learn from others, share what works, get support from people who get it.
Exactly. It's like having this whole support system of people who understand what you're going through. Because sometimes you just need to hear from someone else that you're not crazy, your feelings are valid, and you can get through this. And honestly, one of the most important things I took from this research is that intimacy is different for everyone.
It's not one size fits all.
Exactly.
You've got to figure out what works for your relationship.
Yeah, you might need to throw the rule book out the window.
You do you.
Exactly. And the research talks about embracing vulnerability. That's how you connect more deeply, which I know can be terrifying, especially for someone with BPD.
It's like asking someone to walk straight into their biggest fear, right? But the research makes this really interesting point. When both partners are brave enough to share their insecurities, their fears, their deepest desires in a safe space, that's when the real magic happens.
It's about building intimacy on a foundation of honesty, even, or maybe especially, the messy, imperfect parts of ourselves. And that kind of vulnerability can be incredibly powerful.
It's about saying, this is me, take it or leave it, but in a way that invites closeness, not distance. So how do you actually translate that into everyday life? Because it's easy to talk about vulnerability, but putting it into practice is a whole other ballgame.
Well, the research gave all these great examples of how couples can nurture intimacy outside the bedroom. And it's not about grand gestures or elaborate dates. It's about those small, consistent acts of connection that say, I see you, I hear you, and I'm here for you.
Give me an example. What does that look like in practice?
Imagine this. You're stressed about work, and your partner, knowing how much you love chamomile tea, makes you a cup without you even asking. Or maybe they leave a little note on the bathroom mirror with an inside joke that always makes you smile. These are small gestures, but they speak volumes about paying attention, understanding your partner's needs, and making an effort to show up for them emotionally.
It's about creating those tiny rituals of connection that become the bedrock of a relationship. And when that foundation is strong, it makes weathering the storms so much easier.
Exactly. When you've built up that reservoir of trust and emotional safety, even difficult conversations about sexual needs or managing triggers become less charged. You're approaching those challenges as a team, not adversaries battling it out. And that makes all the difference.
It's about remembering that you're on the same side, even when things get tough. The research actually frames those challenges as opportunities for growth, which I thought was a really interesting perspective.
It's so true. Couples who can approach these complexities with curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to work together often find that they come out stronger and more connected on the other side. It's not about pretending the challenges don't exist, but rather about choosing to face them head on with a spirit of teamwork.
Which brings us back to that essential ingredient we've been circling all along,
Yeah.
communication.
It always comes back to communication, doesn't it? Open, honest, heart-to-heart communication is the bedrock of any healthy relationship. But it's especially critical when navigating the intricate terrain of BPD and sexuality.
It's about ditching the assumptions, the guessing games, the hoping they'll just know what I'm thinking, just talk to each other, not as a one-time thing, but as an ongoing practice of checking in, expressing needs and boundaries, and navigating those inevitable bumps in the road together.
And trust me, there will be bumps. But the source makes a really important point. It's not about avoiding conflict altogether, which is impossible, but about learning how to navigate it constructively. It's about shifting from a me versus you mentality to a we're in this together approach.
It's about remembering that you're on the same team, working towards a shared goal, a fulfilling, supportive, and loving relationship. And you know what really struck me about this whole deep dive? It's so easy to get caught up in the challenges, the complexities, the potential pitfalls of navigating intimacy with BPD. But this research reminds us that there's also immense beauty, depth, and even playfulness to be found when you approach it with openness, understanding, and a willingness to redefine what intimacy means for you as a couple.
So beautifully said, and that's a powerful message to end on.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the complexities of BPD and sexuality, here's my final takeaway for you. Relationships are a journey, not a destination. There will be challenges, detours, and unexpected twists and turns along the way. But when we approach those challenges with empathy, open communication, and a willingness to grow, both individually and together, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities. Remember, you're not alone in this journey, and there's always hope for a brighter, more connected future.